Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. This content is strictly for entertainment and educational purposes only. This is the detailed courtroom testimony for the ongoing federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. Before we continue, comment below where you are watching from and the time you are watching the video. Thank you. Rempire collapsed right there in front of everyone. His face went pale, his body went limp, and security had to rush to catch him before he hit the floor. All because 50 Cent had just done the unthinkable, exposed 2 decades of hidden recordings that nobody knew existed. Nobody expected this bombshell to drop today. The room was already tense during what was supposed to be just another day of testimony. Eyes were focused on the witness stand until Diddy suddenly started gasping for air. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Event the judge froze, no announcement, now warning, just Sean Diddy Combs weeding profusely and struggling to breathe. Until that moment, Diddy had maintained his composure throughout the trial, looking confident despite the serious charges against them. But something had changed. Maybe it was the weight of the evidence finally crushing him. Maybe it was the realization that his former friend had been recording him for years. Maybe it was knowing that his carefully crafted image was about to be shattered forever. Whatever it was, Diddy was done pretending. He wasn't sitting there as a celebrity anymore. He was there as a man who'd built an empire on secrets and silence. A man who now watched it all crumbling before his eyes. And when he began to sway in his seat, the courtroom wasn't prepared for what would happen next. Because what 50 revealed about Diddy's parties, the alleged crimes, and the systematic abuse of power wasn't just explosive. It was a warning to everyone in the entertainment industry that no secret stays buried forever. It started like any other day of the trial. The room buzzed with low conversations. The press hunched in their designated rows and lawyers whispered strategies as they waited for the next witness to be called. But when 50 Cent was unexpectedly added to the witness list, the room changed. You could hear a pin drop. Some people thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was a publicity stunt. But the way 50 Cent walked to the stand with a determined look in his eyes and a hard set his jaw told Reonethis was real. The judge raised an eyebrow, and Diddy, who'd been quietly conferring with his legal team, suddenly looked like he'd seen a ghost. The color drained from his face. His hands, which had been steadily taking notes throughout the trial, began to tremble visibly. Cent took his seat at the witness stand without making eye contact with anyone. He didn't even glance at Diddy, who was now sitting up straighter, eyes wide, with what looked like panic. "I'm here to tell the truth," 50 Cent began. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time." The judge allowed a tan. From that moment on, the entire trial shifted, because what 50 Cent was about to say wasn't part of any media narrative. It wasn't a social media leak. It was something that had been carefully documented and preserved for nearly 2 decades. Diddy's attorney immediately objected, arguing that 50 Cent wasn't on the original witness list and questioning the relevance of his testimony. The prosecutor calmly explained that new evidence had come to light that was directly relevant to the charges of racketeering and sex trafficking. After a brief sigh, the judge overruled the objection and instructed 50 Cent to continue. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. Reporters leaned forward in their seats. Spence Boys, Diddy's family members who had been attending the trial, in a show of support, exchanged worried glances. Cent adjusted the microphone and looked directly at the jury. "What I'm about to share with you isn't based on rumors or hearsay. It's based on recordings I've been collecting since 2003. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Diddy's lead attorney stood up to object again, but Diddy himself placed a hand on his lawyer's arms, topping him. It was as if he already knew what was coming and had resigned himself to facing it. The prosecutor approached with a laptop and several hard drives, presenting the main evidence. "Your Honor, we've had these recordings authenticated by 3 independent audio experts. They are genuine, unaltered, and they directly corroborate the testimony of multiple victims in this case." The judge examined the evidence logs and nodded. "You may proceed." Cent took a deep breath and began to speak. The words that followed would change everything. "I've kept a lot inside for a long time." 50 Cent said, "I've built my own successful music career. I've created hit TV shows and built businesses worth hundreds of millions. But none of that can hide what I experienced and who made it happen." He turned just slightly toward Diddy. "You did." 50 Cent told the courtroom that it started like many Hollywood stories, with what seemed like a professional invitation. It came through mutual connections in the music industry. The way they framed it was supposed to be an networking opportunity at one of Diddy's famous parties. I was still relatively new to the industry, and being invited to one of Diddy's events was a big deal. I'd heard about these parties before, so I didn't question it. But the moment 50 Cent arrived at the mansion in the Hamptons, she knew something was off. The house was massive, secluded behind gates and tall hedges with security everywhere, checking phones at the door. People were acting strangely nervous. The music was loud enough that you couldn't hear conversations happening just a few feet away. He walked in, noticed cameras disguised as home decorations. That should have been the first red flag. They said it was for security, to protect the celebrities who were there. But it felt like something else, like they didn't want just anyone to see what was happening inside. He was gradually introduced to more exclusive areas of the party. The deeper he went into the house, the fewer people there were. There were security guards posted at certain doors checking names against lists. It felt like someone was always watching. Sensa said that after a few hours and several drinks, Diddy approached him directly. He said something like, "I decide who makes it in this industry and who disappears. Everyone here understands that." And he smiled. That smile, it wasn't warmth, it was ownership. At the time, I was still building my career after the shooting that nearly killed me. 50 Cent continued. I wasn't in a position to challenge someone with Diddy's power, but I also wasn't going to be controlled. So I did something that night that I kept doing for the next 20 years. I started recording everything. He explained how he began with small voice recorders hidden in his clothing, eventually upgrading to more sophisticated technology as it became available. I wasn't planning to use these recordings for anything specific. It was self-protection. If something happened to me, there would be evidence. The judge asked if 50 Cent had obtained consent from the parties he recorded in New York, where most of these recordings were made. Only one party needs to consent to a recording, and I consented. Besides, these weren't private conversations. These were things happening in public spaces within private events with dozens of witnesses. Diddy's attorney argued that their recordings were inadmissible, citing privacy laws. The prosecutor countered that their recordings documented criminal activity, which overrode privacy concerns. After considering both arguments, the judge ruled that their recordings could be played, but only those directly relevant to the criminal charges. Cent explained that he'd turned over hundreds of hours of recordings to federal investigators 3 months earlier. After watching the survey, Lance, a video of Diddy assaulting Cassie in the hotel hallway. That video confirmed what I'd witnessed for years. It wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern. As the prosecutor prepared to play the first recording dated August 2003, Diddy began to perspire. His attorney passed him a glass of water, which he drank with a shaking hand. Noon in the courtroom was prepared for what they were about to hear. The first recording began to play through the courtroom speakers. The audio was somewhat muffled with music in the background. But Diddy's voice was unmistakable. Nobody leaves until I say they leave. Nobody says nah to me, do you understand? A female voice sounding frightened responded, please, I just want to go home. Diddy's voice again, you'll go when I'm done with you. That's how this works. 50 Cent explained that this was recorded at an after-party following the MTV Video Music Awards in 2003. I was in a cider room when I heard this happening. The woman was a model who had been brought to the party by one of Diddy's associates. She was trying to leave and he wasn't allowing it. The prosecutor played another recording, this one from 2007. The audio quality was better, with Diddy clearly heard saying, I own everybody in this room. I made you and I can break you just as easily. Don't test me. 50 Cent identified several voices in the background as well-known artists who had been signed to Bad Boy Records. This was at a studio session. Diddy was angry because someone had questioned his creative direction. He went into a rage, threatening not just their career but their personal safety. As more recordings played, 50 Cent explained the context of each one. There were conversations about handling people who had crossed Diddy, discussions about what sounded like payoffs to silence victims, and explicit threats against anyone who might speak out. One recording from 2012 captured Diddy discussing what he called a freak-off planned for the following weekend. Make sure everyone's phones are collected, get usual supplies, double the amount from last time, and make sure everyone signs the NDAs before they get one foot in the door. Another voice asked, what about the special guests? Diddy responded, they don't get a choice, they do what they're told if they want to keep working in this town. With each new record, he seemed to physically shrink in his seat. His attorney repeatedly objected, claiming the recordings were being taken out of context, but the judge overruled each objection as the pattern became clearer. The most damning recording came from 2016, just weeks before the hotel incident, with Cassie. Diddy's voice was heard saying, she's getting too independent, thinking she could make decisions without me. I need to remind her who's in charge. Another male voice responded, "What are you going to do? Whatever it takes." Diddy answered, "I've got too much on her for her to ever leave. She knows what happens to people who cross me." The courtroom was completely silent as this recording played. Several jurors visibly recoiled. Cassie's attorneys present in the courtroom exchanged glances and made notes. Sent explained, "I was at a private dinner at Diddy's house. There were only about 6 people there. He was talking openly about Cassie, who wasn't present. I had a recording device in my watch. I knew something bad was going to happen, but I didn't know how to stop it." The prosecutor asked, "Did you ever try to warn Miss Ventura?" "I tried to send messages through mutual friends," 50 Cent replied. "But Diddy had her so isolated, so controlled that no one could get through to her. And I was afraid of what he might do if he found out I was trying to help her." As more recordings played, a timeline emerged of escalating control, manipulation, and threats spanning nearly 2 decades. The recordings corroborated many of the allegations made by previous witnesses, providing audio evidence of behaviors that had previously been testified to but not documented. Halfway through the presentation of the recordings, Diddy began to breathe heavily. His face had gone from a shent of flushed, hallucinant hysteria, and whispered something to his attorney, who looked concerned and asked the judge for a brief recess. "Your Honor," said Diddy's attorney, "my client isn't feeling well. We request a short break." The judge began to respond when suddenly Diddy stood up, swayed on his feet, and then collapsed. Court officers rushed to his side as chaos erupted in the courtroom. The judge called for order and directed the bailiff to clear the room while medical assistance was called. As Diddy was being attended to, 50 Cent remained on the witness stand, watching impassively as the man who had once been one of the most powerful figures in the music industry lay unconscious on the courtroom floor. When court resumed the following day, Diddy was present but noticeably subdued. Medical reports indicated he had suffered from extreme stress and dehydration, but was well enough to continue with the trial. His legal team's request for a delay was denied by the judge, who stated that the proceedings would continue as scheduled. Cedarus returned to the witness stand to continue his testimony. He said he followed Diddy into an exclusive area at another event in 2009, thinking they were going to discuss a potential business collaboration. Instead, what he saw shook him to the core. There were young women who looked barely conscious. Some I recognized from music videos, some looked frightened and uncomfortable. There were others watching and filming everything, and Diddy was directing the whole scene like it was the most normal thing in the world. He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't know how to leave, and that was the point. Once you're in, you're in," 50 Cent continued, his voice steady but hollow. "A few days after that event, I got a call, blocked number. All the voices said was, 'I know you saw, keep your mouth shut if you want to stay relevant.' Then they hung up." He thought it was just an empty threat until a package arrived at his private residence. It was unmarked. Inside was a USB drive. "I almost didn't look, but I did." It was footage from that night. "I don't remember going into that room or being filmed, but there, I was standing in the background. There was a voice behind the camera. Diddy's voice saying, 'Now I've got something on everyone here.' That's how family works." 50 Cent testified that the fear he felt in that moment was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. "I realized I wasn't invited to that party. I was initiated." He explained that this was when he began to systematically record everything around Diddy. "It wasn't just form anymore. I knew there were victims who had no voice, no power, no way to fight back. I thought if I collected enough evidence, someday there would be a conning." The prosecutor played more recordings from 2010 through 2020, each one revealing aspects of how Diddy allegedly maintained control over artists, employees, and associates. There were conversations about blacklisting people who had refused to participate in freak-offs, discussions about using private investigators to dump dirt and potential threats, and explicit instructions to security personnel about keeping certain people from leaving events. One recording from 2014 captured Diddy saying, "It's not enough to have money. Money can be taken away. It's not enough to have fame. Fame fades. What matters is having something. And everyone around you. That's real power." Tyant explained how this philosophy permeated everything. Diddy didn't just want to be successful, he wanted to own people. He wanted them terrified of crossing him. The prosecutor asked about specific incidents involving other celebrities who had allegedly been victimized or controlled by Diddy. 50 Cent named several high-profile artists who had either been subject to Diddy's manipulation or had witnessed it and remained silent out of fear. It wasn't just about what he did. Lee brought Medicourt, Cent paused, glanced at the jury, and leaned closer to the mic. It wasn't just their recordings, that was the leash. He said from that moment, everything he did felt like it had strings attached to it. He explained that calls would come through various intermediaries, suggestions that he should attend certain events, collaborate with certain artists, invest in certain businesses. When he said nothings would shift behind the scenes, I'd see Nato appearing at one of his parties, and then next week I'd find out I lost a sponsorship deal or a film role. He said this didn't happen once or twice, it became a pattern. Diddy didn't have to threaten people. He had systems that did it for him: label executives, club owners, radio station managers, casting directors. He knew who to call, he knew how to make problems appear out of thin air, and how to make opportunities vanish just as fast. The prosecutor asked 50 Cent about a specific incident 2018 when his TV show Power faced unexpected production challenges. Suddenly filming locations we'd secured fell through, actors got to their offers, equipment rentals era canceled, it took us months to get back on track. Cent nodded. I found out later that Diddy had called some executives at the network after I declined to let them executive produce the show. He told them I was difficult to work with, unstable. It almost tanked the whole project. He described how he began to create his own independent networks of support, building relationships with people who weren't connected to Diddy's sphere of influence. I had to create a parallel career path on he couldn't touch. That's why I moved into television production, liquor brand, herb businesses. It needed to be independent. The prosecutor played a recording from 2019 in which Diddy could be heard discussing 50 Cent with someone else. He thinks she's untouchable now, but nobody's untouchable. Nobody. 50 C's explained that Ash's own power grew, the direct pressure from Diddy lessened, but the underlying threat remained. He moved on to easier targets, people with less money, less influence, less ability to fight back. But he never forgot that I had to fight him. He described watching from a distance as allegations against Diddy began to surface publicly. When Cassie filed her lawsuit, I knew it was just the tip of the iceberg. I knew there were dozens of others with similar stories who were still too afraid to speak. The prosecutor asked, "What made you decide to finally turn over these recordings to federal investigators?" Cent's voice dropped to a quieter, deeper tone. "It stayed quiet for almost 20 years. I convinced myself it wasn't my story to tell, that it wasn't my place to speak for victims who weren't ready to speak for themselves. But then the hotel video started to surface." He said the first time he saw the surveillance footage of Diddy assaulting Cassie, he didn't believe how brutal it was. "Then I got a call, not from law enforcement, from someone I used to trust. They said, 50, they're going to bury this. Diddy's team is already working on it. People are talking," he described, feeling like the floor had dropped from under him. "I didn't even know hotel surveillance footage existed. But once I accepted it might be suppressed, everything else started to connect." Frightened said he stayed up all night replaying memories, the parties, the threats, the carriers destroyed, the lives damaged. It was all a system, and I was one of the witnesses who had the power to expose it. He said the breaking point wasn't fear, it was rage. I realized that if I didn't speak, my silence would become my legacy, and I couldn't live with that. "My kids are going to see these Hedel. Innes, my grandkids might see them. I had to speak," he told the court. He called the FBI himself. He told them, "I have recordings going back 20 years. Whatever you need, whatever questions you have, I'll answer them." He looked at the jury. "I wasn't just a bystander, I was complicit through my silence. I watched and I recorded and I waited." Then he looked at Diddy again, this time with a sharper tone. "And you knew exactly what I was doing." For his final statement, the judge allowed 50 Cent to speak directly to Diddy. He stood from the witness chair, walked a few feet closer, and looked him in the eye. "You built an empire out of fear," he began. "You called it mentorship, you called it family, you called it the bad boy way. But all you built was a prison for everyone around you." Diddy didn't respond. He sat there motionless, his lawyer whispering in his ear. 50 Cent didn't blink. "I saw what you did to young artists. I saw what you did to women. I heard the things you said about people when you thought no one was listening. You broke people for power." Then 50 Cent pulled something from his pocket, a small flip phone outdated by at least 15 years. "This was my first recording device from 2003, right before I first witnessed what you were doing. That's the day I decided I wouldn't be controlled by you." He held it up to the court. "I've carried this azar reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked." Cent turned to the jury. "If you think this is just about parties or me or one video, you're not seeing the whole picture. This is about a system designed to silence victims and protect predators. And if we don't tear it down, it will keep going." Then he faced Diddy one last time. "You once said, 'Can't nobody hold me down.' Well, the truth can." He walked back to the stand, picked up his things, and waited to be dismissed. And he sat there palely and rigid, done blinking, his fingers shaking, because for the first time in decades, he wasn't the one controlling the room. The prosecutor asked one final question. "Mr. Jackson, after all you've witnessed and recorded over the years, Do you believe Sean Kamal Mees is a danger to their Sent didn't hesitate. As long as he has power, money, and influence, yes, the system that enabled him is still in place. The people who helped him are still in positions of power, and the victims are still afraid. As 50 Cent was excused from the witness stand, Diddy suddenly stood up. The courtroom tense, security officers moved closer, but before anyone could react, Diddy's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed again, this time hitting the floor before anyone could catch him. The judge immediately called for medical assistance and cleared the courtroom. Paramedics rushed in with a stretcher. The last image reporters saw before being ushered out was Diddy being lifted onto the stretcher unconscious as his legal team huddled around him. In panic outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, having heard about the dramatic testimony. When 50 Cent emerged, there was a moment of silence before spontaneous applause broke out. He didn't acknowledge it, walking straight to a waiting car with his security team. Reporters shouted, "Do you think justice will be served?" 50 Cent paused briefly before getting into the car. "That's not up to me. That's up to the jury." The car door closed and he was gone. When 50 Cent stepped down from the witness stand, he didn't look like someone who had won anything. He looked like someone who had finally told the truth he'd been carrying for years. The courtroom was still tense, almost unsure how to breathe again. Even the judge looked shaken. Some of the jurors shed tears in their eyes. And Diddy, before his collapse for the first time in the entire trial, looked like he had nothing left to say. Cent didn't speak to the press when he exited. He didn't wave, didn't posture. He walked out the front of the courthouse with his head held high, but his shoulders carried the weight of 20 years of witnessing trauma. When asked later by reporters if he felt relieved, he reportedly responded, "There's no relief in this, only truth, and it's long overdue." But outside the courtroom, the world was only beginning to react. The music industry went into a quiet panic. Executives called emergency meetings. Record labels paused promotional campaigns. Associates who had once publicly supported Diddy were now issuing boilerplate statements of concern and distance. Behind closed doors, crisis management teams were activated. PR firms sent internal memos urging clients to avoid commenting on the case. And while many tried to pretend they were shocked, the internet was already doing what it does best, connecting dots that had been visible for years. Old interviews resurfaced showing Diddy making concerning statements about control and power. Photos of frightened-looking artists at his events were re-examined, and most painfully, previous accusations that had been dismissed as publicity stunts or extortion attempts were being revisited with new credibility. Fans weren't just shocked, they were furious that someone like 50 Cent had to carry this burden alone. Furious that for years legitimate concerns had been dismissed as just rap beef, and furious that the entertainment industry had stayed quiet for so long. The era of silence was over. Diddy remained hospitalized for 3 days following his second collapse in court. His legal team filed for a mistrial, claiming their client was medically unfit to continue. The motion was denied. The judge ruled that the trial would resume the following week, with or without Diddy's presence. Medical reports leaked to the press indicated that Diddy had suffered from extreme stress and anxiety, resulting in elevated blood pressure and heart palpitations. Some speculated it was a strategic move to gain sympathy from the jury. Others believed the collapse was genuine, the physical manifestation of watching his carefully constructed empire crumble in real time. Cent, meanwhile, faced both praise and criticism for his testimony. Supporters hailed him as a whistleblower who had risked his own career to expose the truth. Critics questioned his motives, wondering why he hadn't come forward soon, or if he had been collecting evidence for 2 decades. In a rare interview following his testimony, 50 Cent addressed this criticism direct. Talia needed enough evidence that it couldn't be dismissed. One recording could be explained away. 20 years of recordings tells a story that can't be denied. Legal experts weighed in on how the recordings might impact the case. Criminal defense attorney Marsha Johnson told CNN, "These recordings provide context and corroboration for victim testimony. They show a pattern of behavior that aligns with the allegations. This kind of evidence is powerful because it's the defendant's own words." Former prosecutor Thomas Reynolds added, "The prosecution has built a case that shows not just individual incidents, but a systematic pattern of behavior spanning decades." The recordings are like connective tissue between separate allegations, showing they weren't isolated events, but part of a larger operation. Back in the courtroom as the trial resumed, Diddy appeared noticeably thinner, subdued. His usual designer domers suits were replaced by more conservative attire. His family's presence in the courtroom had diminished, with only his mother and one of his sons attending regularly. Stay tuned and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay updated on the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Also, share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.